Hi there, welcome to my channel. My name is Oluwatosin. On today's episode, I'll be showing you how to cut a simple gathered gown with 180-degree flare sleeve. For this gown, I made use of 6 yards of Ankara fabrics. Although I didn't use everything, but I got 6 yards of Ankara fabrics. And the measurements needed are your full length, your half length, your shoulder measurement, your bust, your waist, and your sleeve measurement. For this sleeve, I made use of 180-degree flare sleeve. So you need your sleeve measurement. So in this video, I've cut out the half length, which is my shoulder to my half length measurement. Then I went ahead to chalk 2 inches. This piece that I put down is the back piece. The 2 inches that I'm chalking is for the zip allowance. So after chalking out the zip allowance, I'll place the front measurement. Please note that I did not put it together, like I put it on the spot where the chalk measurement starts from. It's not going to be together because the front piece will not have a zip allowance. So the next thing is to go ahead and mark out 8 inches for my shoulder measurement. I started my marking on the front sleeve, not the back sleeve. Please notice I started the measurement on the front sleeve, not the back sleeve piece. Then I went ahead to chalk out my shoulder slope. I used 1 inches for the shoulder slope, then I'll slant it out. After that, I went ahead to chalk the armhole measurement. For this tutorial, I made use of 8 inches for my armhole measurement. 8 inches depends on you. You can use more than that depending on the armhole measurements of your client. You can measure it on the body of your client. After fixing the armhole curve, then I'll go ahead to impute my body measurements. First, I'll start with the bust measurement. Now, for the bust measurement and the waist measurement, it is my bust measurement divided by 4. Then I'll add 2 inches to it. So let's assume that my bust measurement is 40. Divided by 4 makes it 10, right? Then I'll go ahead and add 2 inches. So that means I'll go ahead and chalk 12 inches for the bust measurement. I'll also do the same thing for my waist measurement, meaning that my waist measurement divided by 4 plus 2 inches. Then I'll join both the bust measurement and the waist measurement together. The next thing is to chalk out the round neckline measurements. Here I'm making use of a round neckline. Now for the front piece, I use 3.5 by 5 inches. 3.5 by 5 inches. This is very okay for a round neck measurement. But for the back piece, I use 3.5 by 2 inches. 3.5 by 2 inches. That is because I don't want my back piece to be low. I want it to be high. If you want yours to be low, like low back neckline, you can make use of like 5-6. That would be okay. There was something I totally forgot to do when I was cutting the back piece. Now, our half length for the front is more than the half length for the back. So in that case, to avoid zipper bulge, you have to cut off 1 inch in a slant way, just like I'm doing when you are cutting your back piece. You cut it in a very slanted way because the length is different. Now, after I'm done cutting the part I forgot to do earlier, I'll go ahead and mark 1.5 inches for where I'll fix the zip. Remember that I used 2 inches initially. Out of that 2 inches, I used half inch to sew the lining. So the remaining 1.5 inches where I would impute my zipper. The next thing to do here is to impute the dart measurement. Now, to get your dart, it is your nipple to nipple measurement. Now, for you have to measure this on your client. For this person that I'm working with for this measurement, I made use of 4.5 inches. 4.5 inches because, as you can see, I initially put 4.5 inches, but half inches to the right, half inches to the left. Then I'll make it in a slanted form because I'll be sewing in half inches. On my client, the measurement is 8 inches. That's the nipple to nipple measurement. But on the clothes, I made use of 4.5 inches, half inches to the right, half inches to the left. Eventually, I'll be left with my 4 inches. The length of the dart measurement, this piece is the back piece. So the length for the back piece is 13 inches. I made use of 13 inches. It depends on you. You can use something higher, you can use something lower or shorter. But most times, it's not advisable for you to use more than 10, 12, or 13 inches. The next is to chalk out the dart measurement for the front piece. Now, for the front piece, the length for the front piece is not as long as that of the back. Here, I made use of 5 inches for the length. Here, I also made use of the same way I did for the back piece, which is 4.5 inches. This is to help me have a proper grips of the under bust side. So I'll stop at 5 inches. Usually this 5 inches is most times below the under bust. So 5 inches by 4.5 inches, that is what I use. Now look at this, just like I'm doing it. I made it in a very slanted way. When you are sewing your dart, it has to be a very slant and pointed at the tip. It has to be very pointed so that to give it a very good finishing. The next is to cut the lower part of the gown, which is where it will be gathered. So let's assume that our waist measurement is 40 inches. 40 inches divided by 2, that will make it 20 inches. Then I'll add 10 inches to it. 10 inches, that makes 30 inches. So in total, I'll cut out 30 inches, not 20 inches, because I need that extra 10 inches is what I'll use to gather. Please note that this 30 inches is just for the front alone. The 30 inches that I cut out, I'll cut it out twice. So I'll cut out 30 inches twice. That 30 inches is going to be across the waist. I also have to measure the full length of the down part. That is the full length minus the half length. That is what will determine what I will cut out. The full length minus the half length, that is what will determine what I'll cut out. Please note that I cut this out twice. So 30 inches by the full length of the gown. After that, I took it to my sewing machine. I sewed it all round and I gathered it. Now, I want you to look carefully at how I placed the gathered fabric and the lining. I put the half length measurements in between the gathered fabric and the lining. This is because I want it to have a neat finishing. I don't want the gathered part of the fabric to be showing. I want the lining to cover it up. So that is why I put three different things together, but the half length measurement is in between. So this is how it looks like after I was done putting the two fabrics together. That's the upper part and the lower part. Can you see that it has a neat finish? You cannot see the gathered part of the fabric. I've been able to cover it up with the lining. After this, I'll join it by the shoulder and I'll also join it by the side. is to cut the sleeve of the gown. Note that I'm making use of 180-degree flay. So I joined two ends of the fabric together and I turned it into a rectangular shape, just as you are seeing. So in order to get the radius of the sleeve, I'm going to be using the measurement of the armhole measurement. Here I'm using 20 inches, which is like 20 inches per sleeve. That is the measurement I'm using. So I divided it into four in order to give me like 10 or 11 inches, just for the sake of allowance. So that was how I cut mine. Then I measured the sleeve. That's how long I want the sleeve to be. Although there's a standard measurement for getting the radius of the sleeve or of any flay, but I didn't make use of it in this case. I just decided to freestyle and divide it by four. So I measured the full length and I cut it out. As you are looking at this flare that I cut, you notice that it is not enough, the length is not enough. So I will join the remaining fabric to it so that it will match up and it should be enough. But eventually I didn't need it because I realized that the length of the flare was a bit too long for the person. So I reduced everything in total. So with that, we've come to the end of today's tutorial. Please do well to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like and share to your friends. Thank you and God bless you.